morning, good afternoon, good evening. Today is Heroes Day. Would I join in celebrating Heroes Day? The answer is no, I would not. Because I ask myself, would the true heroes of Zimbabwe fight to end white colonial domination and exploitation be joining in celebrating? And the answer to that has got to be an emphatic no. Nehanda and Kaguvi are turning in their graves to see what Zimbabwe has become. Anyone who believes that those true heroes are pleased to see what is happening in Zimbabwe today are incredibly naive. Why would Nehanda and Kaguvi celebrate that Zimbabwe has become the byword for a failed state, in which millions of our people are living in abject poverty, hopelessness, and despair? Why would she want to celebrate that? And yet this is what Zimbabwe has become. The truth of the matter is, while we were fighting the whites, we all believed in the one man, one vote, freedom, justice, peace, and a share in the nation's wealth and prosperity. As we got nearer to our independence in 1980, Robert Mugabe and his cronies hijacked the revolution and used it for their own ends. By the time the country held its first elections in 1980, one man, one vote was abandoned. Mugabe and his cronies had their operatives in the field telling the people that if Zanu PF does not win the election, the Bush war would continue. The people, of course, elected to end the Bush war. They voted to end the Bush war, not knowing that with that vote, they were giving up their most basic and fundamental right to have a meaningful say in the governance of the country. We have never recovered that. Never. The nearest the country has ever got to holding free, fair, and credible elections was in 2008. SADC had put a lot of pressure on Zanu PF to ensure the elections were free, fair, and credible. And when Mnangagwa and company realized that they were losing the elections when the results started coming in, they stepped in, hijacked the whole process for their own selfish ends. Here is Professor Ibo Mandaza, explaining what happened in 2008.
I also know that Mugabe conceded defeat on 2008. He phoned Mbeki and Obasanjo to concede defeat. I hope that Thabo Mbeki and Obasanjo will one day make that public. But one of them, I won't say which one, told me that Mugabe phoned them that Saturday night and said, look, I lost the election and I concede defeat. And I know that Mugabe stuck to his guns. I was prepared to go. His wife was since bags packed to go somewhere on the following day when Mnangagwa and Chiwenga approached him and said, you stay where you are. And then they contrived the runoff, sadly with the help of South Africa. And runoff took place, very violent. 360 people were killed. I don't know. The South African, I came here as part of a delegation to Cape Town to see members of the ANC. I don't want to mention names, they're my friends. I saw them, and through them, a cabinet committee subcommittee of South African cabinet was set up on the Zimbabwe issue. It was on the basis of that cabinet committee that South Africa did not recognize the runoff. And indeed, it was the basis of that committee that Thabo sent the generals to South Africa, to Zimbabwe. I met them, and I was one of the few to have read the report, because I was flying to Joburg in the company of General Romano, who was a friend. He passed away, no? So, yeah. And I also took people who had lost their hands in the violence to the South African embassy in Harare. And Romano broke down in tears. How can a liberation movement treat these people like that? He was a broken man. So there's no doubt at all here in South Africa as to the brutality of the regime in Harare. So it amazes me, it angers me, in fact, when I hear the nonsense coming out of people like Mbalula's mouth. They know it. And the report has never been published, the general's report, to this day. That tells you. Is it complicit behavior? I don't know. But to get back to 2008, the runoff took place. Mugabe was sworn in at midnight before boarding a plane with Mbeki to Sharm el-Sheikh. Ambassador, I forgot to mention that. Yes? I won't talk about it was contrived, but clearly there was a definite plan to keep Mugabe in office. And it's no secret that I had Thabo speaking the other day, saying the Zimbabwean people came together to form the GNU. It's only half true. Morgan Tsvangirai was literally regimented into the GNU. That's a fact.
We cannot deny the historic fact that Zimbabwe has never really achieved any of the aspirations of the revolution. The level of brutality in 2008 was unbelievable. Here is Robert Mugabe boasting about the need for Zanu PF to reavert to the violence and tyranny worse than that the whites had inflicted on the people. He is saying he's declaring another war on the people for the purposes of retaining power.
Kana inina katakaisa bairo panapa ndinochikanda pasi ndoti vakomana kwatakabva.
If the truth be told, credit where credit is due, SADC and the AU refused to recognize Mugabe and Zanu PF's victory in 2008. They forced the regime to go into the GNU. The primary purpose of the GNU was to implement the democratic reforms necessary to stop the blatant cheating in the vote count, as happened in the vote count of the March 2008, and the want of violence during the runoff. But what actually happened in practice is that not even one token reform was implemented in the 5 years of the GNU. Not even one token reform. Mugabe bribed the MDC leadership with the trappings of high office, and they forgot about the reforms. So Zanu PF emerged out of the 2008 to 2013 GNU with the same dictatorial powers, with the added bonus that this time they had an opposition which will participate in flawed elections, no matter how flawed and illegal the process gets, as long as they get a share of the spoils of power. Unfortunately, the people themselves have failed to realize what is going on. And so they've been conned to participate in flawed elections to give Zanu PF legitimacy and perpetuate their own suffering. I repeat, Nehanda and Kaguvi are not celebrating Heroes' Day. They are turning in their graves to see what Zimbabwe has become. The byword of a failed state in which millions are living in abject poverty, hopelessness, and despair. Why would they celebrate that? But that is the reality. It was America, one of America's founding fathers, Benjamin Franklin, who said, they who can give up essential liberties to obtain a little temporary safety deserves neither the liberty nor the safety. After 45 years since our independence, of Zanu PF rigging the elections and imposing themselves on the nation, any Zimbabwean who has learned anything at all in the last 45 years would agree that while the people thought that by giving up their right in 1980 to a meaningful say in the governance of the country, to buy for themselves temporal safety, to end the Bush War. In the end, we lost our liberty and we lost the safety we were after. There is nothing we have gained in Zimbabwe from independence. If the fight for independence can be compared to breaking an egg to make an omelette, yes, it was necessary to end white colonial rule. That's breaking of the egg. The omelette was for everyone to enjoy their fundamental rights and freedoms and share in the nation's wealth and prosperity. Zanu PF has denied the ordinary person the right to a meaningful vote and all the other rights and freedoms these last 45 years. In other words, the masses were promised that they will get the omelette. But in reality, they've never got it. We cannot, 45 years after independence, keep celebrating getting the eggshells. We removed the whites. Yes, removing the whites was not the alpha and omega of the armed struggle. It was a means to an end, not the end itself. Why is Zanu PF telling us that that was the end? Worse still, why do we accept that irrational nonsense? Zimbabwe's independence one of the most essential requirements is that people should have a meaningful say in the governance of the country. One man, one vote is as valid today as it was before independence. Mnangagwa has rigged elections, blatantly rigged elections for his own selfish gain. He has even boasted that he doesn't care that SADC and the AU have repeatedly condemned Zimbabwe's failure to hold free, fair, and credible elections. We as a people, we should demand that we put an end to this circus of rigged elections. Here is Mnangagwa boasting after the 2023 elections, when SADC and the AU election observers condemned the election process as flawed and illegal.
Kana vakatuka Zanu PF kana ndonyanyisa kufara kana vakatuka Zanu PF kana ndonyanyisa kufara zvakanaka ukavona vavengi vakwashi kurumbidza nekuchikanganisa ukavona vachiti Zanu PF yakaipa farai you are doing correct things for your country. Home takaita maelections edu kuna vamwe vaitaura zvisina musoro zvikanzi maelection arafamba zvakanaka ndezvavo.
No, free, fair, and credible elections are a necessary and essential requirement for good governance. Zimbabwe cannot keep on pretending that we can somehow be a successful and prosperous nation when we can't even hold free, fair, and credible elections. After 45 years of rigged elections, we must cure ourselves of this curse. I come back to my original argument that there is nothing to celebrate in Zimbabwe today, Heroes Day, because the true heroes, people like Nehanda and Kaguvi, are not celebrating. They are turning in their graves to see what the nation has become. Rightly so too. Zimbabwe has become the byword for a failed state. There's nothing to celebrate there. There's everything to be ashamed of. And anyone who celebrates this Heroes Day has failed to realize, even with the benefit of 45 years, that the people of Zimbabwe were shortchanged in 1980. And after 45 years, the penny should have dropped by now. I repeat, there is nothing to celebrate. If the true heroes and heroines of our liberation, our fight to end white colonial domination, are turning in their graves, what reason do you have to celebrate? Thank you.